All right, so today I figured I'd kind of make this charcoal video for a change of pace and something that's not about portrait painting. So um, here you can see behind me, I'm currently working on this charcoal figure drawing, and the kind of thought that came to my mind lately was I would really like to draw a figure. And when I was in school, I actually didn't do a charcoal figure drawing with a background because the pace I was kind of going at the school required me to move to painting before I could tackle that project. So I kind of felt always that I missed out on something because those things have a nice quality. So, I figured I'd take some time now to just see how it feels again to work in a kind of more academic sort of way, working on a charcoal drawing. And the thing I wanted to show today was like how to actually really push and refine the drawing, because it's, easy enough to just go ahead and apply charcoal on a paper, but how do you like really refine it to the maximum level of finish? And that's not something that's maybe taught in many places, I don't think so. So that's something that just short version takes a lot of time and effort and some strain injuries, and I'm really tired of doing it already, but I'm close to finishing. So I'll just show how I do it today. And there's some specific tools you need to like push a drawing to a maximum level of finish. One thing, the paper itself. At least for this specific technique, like the academic technique, requires a little bit of grain, so you can really push the values, and so the charcoal kind of goes between the hills and valleys, and of the paper, the charcoal can get pushed into the valleys and sticks there, so it creates a really dark kind of tone for the paper. And if it's really smooth, the charcoal won't stay there as well. The tone will be slightly lighter than the darkest dark possible with a grainier paper. And that's one thing that's of course good for the value range of the drawing. You can make higher contrast, more three-dimensional things, and all that good stuff. But the turn side kind of that is, well, it's grainy. If you want a really like high resolution finish to your drawing and not this kind of grainy thing going over your drawing, then of course you're gonna have to somehow address that thing. And some things I do and I was taught to do at school is first use tools. This is a bristle brush, and it can be used both to erase and apply charcoal, using charcoal powder in a jar. This is just a jar of charcoal powder that I've been kind of filling up with all the charcoal I use when I sharpen my charcoal sticks. And on the other side is a bit of sponge, and you can use this to apply even more charcoal. And in the very dark areas, you can erase with it as well, without taking all of it away and making it very, very white, which obviously looks quite horrible if you make a white mark in the middle of a dark section of the drawing. And you can use a lot of imagination with this. This is something some artists use, charcoal pouch, not something we used in school. There's charcoal powder in this. It's made of an old sock and hair tie, and you can just kind of tap this on there. If I demonstrate here, I just tap it on the paper and it leaves charcoal, and it kind of can also smooth things out a little bit while you're at it. There's other kinds of things like stumps, and this I guess is something like the sponge I'm using anyway on that end of the brush, but there's multiple tools you can use, and you kind of just have to develop a feel for that. So that's more or less how you like lay in the charcoal in mass when you're actually looking for the values in something like this. For example, the dark areas here and here, are more or less laid in, but by just applying charcoal powder on there, not by hatching with a charcoal stick. As you can see, it creates a softer finish and maybe gives it something like a painterly quality, which obviously is nice because painting is kind of my thing. The most important tools for actually rendering out the charcoal. And there's many ways to render things, this is just one of those things. Maybe someone out there renders by just hatching with lines and creates the tones that way. That's fine. That's a different way of approaching the thing. Kneadable eraser. These are available in all art stores. It's kind of like this blue tack sort of material. Maybe you saw it in my previous videos. I use this for painting as well. Not the same eraser, of course. We don't want that painting oil or oil paint actually in the same eraser as the charcoal. That wouldn't do quite well for the drawing. And then sharp charcoal sticks. And you can see maybe on this paper there's some contrast, so you can see actually it's quite sharpened to a small point, and that's done by using a sanding pad. This is the official Nitrem sanding pad, but to create one you need a block of wood and of course sandpaper. And you can have any grit you really want, maybe a rougher one for other side and finer one for the other, but this Nitrem pad just has one grit and it works fine. So you just kind of take the pad and sort of sharpen it as one might until it's a really fine point. And something helpful, of course, after you sharpen it, it takes a bit of practice. You might break some when trying it out for the first time. It takes a bit of practice to get used to the pressure and not overdoing it. After you sharpen it, you wipe out the excess charcoal so you're not kind of bringing specks of dust onto the paper you don't want there. Maybe it's more necessary with the darker charcoals like the soft one and the medium softness one in Nitrem. That's the green one and the orange one. This is the blue one or the hard one. It keeps its point fairly well because it's kind of the harder thing. It leaves lighter marks and that makes it very good for rendering. So we're gonna go a bit closer up and look at the process of me rendering a butt cheek. So here we are looking at the butt cheek. And when we're up close like this, you maybe start to notice some things happening in the grain of the paper. And maybe if I try to illustrate some things, I can see all these kind of lighter wormy lines going in around the applied charcoal. And those are some things I'm gonna darken with this small charcoal stick that's very, very sharp. And as you understand, if I put my charcoal stick here, like this, it's like barely small enough to fit in that crack. The crack is visible, as you can see on the video. Maybe I'll boost the contrast so you know better what I'm actually talking about. It kind of creates this noisy effect from a distance when we're looking at the image. So what we're trying to do is maybe not like dot pick all of the things that we see there, but rather reduce the noise to a more comfortable level where, the forms, the three-dimensional forms, like the turning of the tones, is more visible. So there's no like light lines and dark lines going haywire around the image, and creates this kind of sense of volume in the picture. For this image specifically, I found it online and I felt I need to go kind of full on with the dot picking because, the whole figure is actually in shadow. It's backlit or rimlit, maybe, this figure, and the tones are kind of subtle. I would get away with a much more crude finish if it was, say just turning from the light to shadow, like in the middle of the figure. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and start working and, Maybe I'll speed things up a bit for you so you can see how the image comes along. Oh, and before that, actually we have this kneaded eraser, and one can actually form a really sharp kind of little tentacle sort of thing with this, and we can go really fine with it as well. So this is something we use to then pick the dots. You know, this technique is kind of called dot picking. So as one can see, dark dots appear on the texture of the paper. Those are usually the kind of peaks of the texture of the paper, and the light bits are the valleys, because you know when we apply charcoal, generally it kind of catches onto the peaks, and sometimes there's too much charcoal, sometimes there's too little in the valleys. So we're evening that out. And yeah, I mean, you have to do both things. You never like, it's never either or, you know, only lightening things or only darkening things. You have to be selective. Look at the whole picture, and if it's darker overall, you kind of start lightening things, and if it's too light overall, you know, you see a lot of these worms going around. Maybe you need to actually kind of go around and fill these white things up, like you see here maybe. And then you can start seeing the bigger picture. Usually what happens is a lot of dark spots happen after you fill in those light cracks, and you realize it's breaking the form. And then you take out those dark spots, you find some more light stuff, and you kind of refine it until you step back and you realize there's nothing that's kind of bothering you anymore. So yeah, let's get to it. What I'm using here is a mole stick. It's just something I got from the art supply store. You can use any stick, obviously. This is an authentic Zecchi Firenze product, which is very dear to me from my student days, so I'm using this one today. I'm gonna start by actually just starting to fill in those squigglies, and I'm starting from the edge of the form because then I know kind of I have a direction to go towards. One thing one might do, you know, if there's a glaringly white area in the middle of the picture and it's kind of distracting, then you might fill those things in as well, starting kind of with the most obviously wrong thing in the picture, and then you just kind of start to refine it from there. But for me this works because we have to make things darker near the shadow to turn the form really towards, you know, well, to turn the form, let's leave it at that at this point. But if you start here and you make things a certain value, you might realize by the time you get here that it's actually way too dark over here or way too light over here, and you need to do a lot of things here. So it's better to start in here and then work your way upwards, because that's going to make a lot more sense in the end. You won't run into the risk of like having the wrong value here, because here you can just kind of meld it with the form up to the light, as opposed to here where you might have to make things suddenly very dark and you kind of lose the drawing and the sense of turning there. So yeah, it helps to keep the kind of big picture. And artists are often told to squint to see values. That sometimes is helpful. Well, very often is helpful, let's put it like that. The thing you want to be careful of when doing something like this is, of course, not squinting, because it's kind of bound to look a bit better when things meld together. They're quite close in value in the end, so you might kind of start thinking it's actually better than it is if you squint. So rather than squinting in this case, you might want to really open up your eyes and let all the light in, so the kind of the grains of the paper really kind of pop up, and this contrast, at least to me, it feels like the contrast kind of improves. And maybe from this pace you start realizing that this actually takes quite a long time to do, and the more you do it, the more there starts to be visible texture again, you know, because you really don't like nail it the first time. So now that I've worked a little bit in this area, I start noticing there's a dark line over here. Maybe that came from me actually working, because, you know, if I hit any of the kind of hills of the paper texture, then some more charcoal might end up there than in the cracks, and I need to readdress that. So maybe I'll show you here, like take this very, very thin noodle of the eraser and just go and take that thing out, and maybe it starts looking a little bit better. At least there's less contrast with the lighter stuff around it now. And speaking of that, like, you kind of in general, if you go to a random area like this, you're gonna have to like address is the shape I'm seeing like actually lighter than the areas around it, or is it just surrounded by some darker things? If the answer is it's surrounded by darker things, and that's why it appears lighter, then of course you don't want to like darken this, lighten this stuff in here, because then if you remove the darker things surrounding it, then it just might be the right value in the middle, and then you've done kind of extra work, which you really don't need when you're doing this technique. So this drawing is probably like around 30 hours in already, and I've been doing it in this single week. So it's starting to kind of I'm starting to get a little bit of wariness settling in of this rendering stuff. I've been doing it quite a lot. So, and I'm not even rendering out the background or anything that detailed. I'm only doing the dot picking for the figure, since I feel that's the main focus in here, and I kind of like the rest of the drawing a little bit more loose, kind of atmospheric, let's say. I feel that fits the image well. So this image is actually, as I found out, 1920 vintage photograph. And how I came by it was like just searching for old nude pictures, I guess, you know, for this very specific purpose, because I kind of didn't feel very inspired just looking for some random, you know, photo reference of random posing figures, you know, taken today. And I felt like, you know, there might be some very cool photos with a little bit of this kind of artifact and grain on the photograph. You know, they're already this kind of sepia or monochrome color, suits very well for charcoal as reference. You know, I don't have to interpret color there, so that's one helpful thing. So in a way, this is like more beginner friendly than actually going ahead and looking at a live figure and translating all those things into the drawing. So this is in effect like a bit faster than actually drawing from life. Also, like, because you can use a lot of different stuff to fix the drawing at the start of the stage, instead of you know, with the live figure you have to like really just stay true and measure things out. And for this one, I obviously measured things out, but I didn't have to do it so many times because the figure isn't moving. It's a photograph, so I can use, you know, the borders of the image as reference points and all that stuff for measuring out things which the live model doesn't have. You know, they don't have a frame surrounding them for, you know, reference. They only have themselves and maybe some objects around, which are definitely helpful, but it's a kind of a different approach. So you can really get into a kind of meditative state when doing this. I'm just checking how it looks in the video. So actually checking the screen of the camera, I notice, you know, the cameras usually tend to push the contrast a little bit more. So I noticed I'm kind of lacking some tone in this area, you know. So I can go here. And maybe an important thing to realize, like here, the kind of the resolution of the image, let's say, that's something that is part of the modern language. So the goal isn't to make this from, you know, a 720p drawing into a full HD drawing, like to increase the resolution and the kind of pixel density of this image. That's not really the goal. The goal is to push this refinement to a place where it's actually possible to read these kind of very subtle transitions of tone, which is not possible if it's like, you know, this whole area, if it just kind of averages out in tone because of a lot of grains like light and dark stuff. It's not going to read very well, and it's not going to also read very well for, you know, a female figure's soft skin. And that's something you can also consider when making, you know, anything like from drawings to paintings, you know. The usually female skin is depicted kind of soft because that's how it tends to be. And that would be soft, of course, in contrast to things. For example, an enamel vase would be like extremely soft in terms of transitions, and the female skin might look kind of rough or grainy against it in a painting because you kind of want to make those things feel different to each other. And that said, you know, maybe something like a rug or you know, I don't know, maybe a wall of plaster behind the figure or something like that. That might be a lot grainier, you know. So these are things you can like use to emphasize the kind of impact of the drawing. If everything is kind of the same smooth finish, it might even look a little bit plasticky in the end, you know. There's no like surface texture to the objects in the image. That's something we were kind of paying attention to when still life painting. Even though we used to blend things to quite a great extent to serve the realism of the image, not everything was treated equally. So it's time to grab the eraser when I'm not seeing as many of these lighter bits anymore. And what we see here now is like a kind of darker patch of tone forming in the middle. And maybe we want to get rid of that so we can see what's actually happening there. And you know, when you're doing this, it's honestly really not something you see at first. You're just kind of, maybe there's this kind of sense of unsatisfaction with your drawing because you don't know like where to go next. Maybe you feel everything is in place, but you're not sure how to do things to push it forward. So this is something that might, you know, take it to that next level. But it takes time for your eye to calibrate to this level of like seeing the differences in the tone. And that's something academic training, of course, like atelier training, looking at the cast for 200 hours is of course very, very good for. That's kind of the point, like sensitizing your eye to very subtle things. And actually we did this same kind of dot picking for the flat black backgrounds of the cast drawings. Maybe I'll add an image to the video so you can actually see what I mean, but that whole background is just dot picked in the same sense as this one. So you can realize how nutty it is, like when I'm working on like, I don't know, 4 square centimeters here, and it's taking this long. And if you do like, I don't know, like 30 by 20 area of a black background and you want to make it really smooth, it's obviously going to take like a week at least. But, you know, it was very annoying. But, you know, by the 3rd day when I was doing that, I really started to see like all these different values in just a flat black tone, or what appeared to me as a flat black tone before doing that. So it was sort of a thing where you unlock something in your eye. And starting this drawing, I actually, it took me like, I don't know, like the first day was more or less blocking in the drawing. That was after work, so it was like a couple hours just finding the outlines and the large shapes of things in this drawing. And then the second day was more or less like massing in the tones. And the third day, starting to kind of refine things. Maybe by the end of that day, I actually started to see these things again. It took me like around 3 working days to kind of recalibrate my eye to actually seeing these nuances. And part of that comes from, of course, when you push a drawing to a higher resolution like this, then you start seeing more differences in that specific area, because they kind of stand out when it's not as refined. So the more you do this, the more work you're creating for yourself. Like here we're approaching a point where there's kind of these small dots here, but I'm not really that interested. When I squint or step back, it's not really distracting me from the form, so I think I'll just leave it at that stage. And in school, there were some people who were just crazy about this dot picking stuff, Not gonna mention any names, but there's a legendary ear cast drawing that you literally had the grain of the paper kind of distracting you because it was so grainy and everything was dot picked to such a smooth finish. That drawing probably took more than a year, maybe 2 to make, I don't know. Not everyone was extremely focused on progressing through the projects quickly. So for me, that was, a question of getting back to my life as well as a monetary question. So I tried to push myself to work hard, and it worked. But yeah, I mean, maybe this is enough to kind of show you that this is how you refine it. You go back and forth, you take some things out, you add some things in. This is maybe a bit of an extreme example. Some areas it's enough to just kind of pick out a few dots and it reads well. But as I was saying, this is, the soft skin of a female figure, and it's in a very like subtle area, a shadow for one, where we want things to be very soft and smooth, as opposed to the lights where we could have some texture showing, for example. And the differences in value are much more obvious, where we can get the form to read easier without so subtle shifts in value. So we might get away with less of this stuff, in the lights. But yeah, maybe like this is a good enough demonstration for how it's done. And yeah, I hope you found this video inspiring or informative, let's say. I don't really recommend doing this technique, but I think it's good to know, if you're interested in working charcoal, that this is something you can do to push your drawing skills to the next level. I don't think it's financially viable to do this kind of thing for, if your goal is to become an artist who actually sells their artwork. You have to ask a lot of money for something that is, dot picked for 100 hours after you basically block out the drawing. So that's not very easy to kind of get a good hourly rate for. It's not like we do this for the hourly rate though, so like this is a personal project for me. Maybe I will sell it, but definitely not gonna make a huge profit on it. But maybe it's gonna just stay on my wall because I enjoy the image. It's kind of a serene image. And we don't have any charcoals on the wall, at least for now. Charcoal figures. I have some drawings from the academy, but I haven't framed those. And to be honest, I enjoy this work a bit more, visually speaking, than just those simple charcoal studies. So yeah, maybe I'll frame this one. If you're interested, let me know though. Maybe I will sell it to someone who enjoys it as much as I do. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. So let me just stop here and Let me know how you like this kind of live commentary thing. And see you in the next one.